All right. Hi, everybody. I think we've reached attendance. Thank you all for coming to the fourth joint webinar by WorkLab and the Venture Forum, sponsored by Evox 365. Before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about us. For those who don't know, this webinar is put on in partnership by WorkLab, a nonprofit organization committed to cultivating entrepreneurship in Worcester and Central Mass. We offer affordable space, equipment, and services to startup companies and new businesses. And we host a variety of events to help entrepreneurs gain valuable knowledge and resources. If you're interested in learning more about us, you can visit our website at worklab.org. That's spelled with a C, not a K, or you can talk to me at the end of the meeting. Now I'll pass it on to Zach Dutton to say a few words about the Venture Forum. Zach, you're muted.
Thank you, Tyler. Again, my name is Zach Dutton, and I'm the Executive Director of the Venture Forum. I'm excited to be here for this webinar. Venture Forum is also a nonprofit based in Worcester, and we work with early stage startups in the tech space, advanced manufacturing, and others to help them grow and scale their businesses here in Central Massachusetts. We do this by connecting them to the resources that they need and providing different educational opportunities such as this webinar. Thanks, Tyler.
All right, thanks, Zach. All right, we have Poya here to talk to you about software bundles and how to use them cost effectively to increase your startup's productivity. Go ahead, Poya.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Zach, and thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Venture Forum and WorkLab for having us for this presentation. And hopefully for the next hour or so, we're going to walk the attendees through some of the good kind of features that they could actually get from these type of software conversations. So a little bit about us. We are a Microsoft consulting company, and we started with a few of Microsoft 365 experts. We have some ideas on niche markets, specifically startups being one of them. And we have like offshore and onshore resources. You can see some numbers there, 20, 30, and these other numbers that represent the number of experts that we have in different areas, even data and AI. And a little bit about myself. So I have been in Microsoft space for years, I would say close to like 10 or so. And I have been in a number of different conversations, similar conversations around how Microsoft technologies can help SMBs, small to mid-size, and startups to kind of get the best out of what they're already using and help them with that journey. I also got some different certifications, which are, some of these are related. That's why we listed out. There are others on different cloud environment too. And as of like a few years ago, I kind of shifted my focus on the cost saving strategies. And then this workshop and other workshops like this are a sample of those that we typically do to make sure that, especially, given the economies that we're in these days, it's going to help them moving forward. And I co-founded Evox 365 last year, and you can find me on LinkedIn randomly, but if you can search that, you can find it. So with that, I'm going to start about the topic, but before we even start and to discuss what the options are and how it works, I want to take a step back and talk about, well, it's a made-up term. It's called technological productivity. But essentially what it means is what to look for when you're essentially picking a tool set or a bundle for your business, especially in the early stage business that you are in, maybe startups. You need to be focused on certain different items. And for the sake of time, I just put in like 5 or 6 of those that are very important to kind of consider. The first one is the cost-effective solutions. Obviously, you want to save money, right? So no-brainer. You want to make sure that you have it. But the caveat here is you need to also make sure that even though you are going after the cost-effective solutions, it's going to address your need too. The second one is start with the basic tools. We get that all the time. You can get Ferrari for your business for sure, but sometimes you don't need to start there because there is a learning curve involved. There are all sorts of different things involved in that. So you don't want to engage yourself in so many complicated tools out there, even though they offer you like a free tools or services. The second one is on the flexibility aspect of it. You need to make sure that out of all these solutions out there, if you find the right tools and packages that could offer that flexible portion of the business to you, that will make you comfortable moving forward. What do we mean by that is sometimes if you reach out to a company and ask them about these elements that they put in and they call it a bundle, you learn that, like some of these third-party tools, you cannot specifically define what might happen to this tool a year from now or what features should be added on to that. It's very good to have that component to that so you can learn that, especially with cloud these days. Companies tend to offer more and more of these features, and you can, the best conversation to have is to learn about their roadmap and where they're getting it. Prioritize collaboration. There was a Microsoft seminar about this a few weeks ago, and they compared the companies that are actually prioritizing collaboration, small, mid-size, even large enterprises, versus the one that we all think as a name and a term that collaboration is important, but are they prioritizing or not? And they learned, especially throughout the COVID and those times, the companies who were connected and they were using these collaborative tools and communication, they were way more productive by 20 or 30% than others based on certain criteria. So you got to make sure that the tool or bundle that you're going after had that component baked into this. Also, there are tools with the growth potential. It kind of goes back with one of the terms that I just explained. So let's say we start with the basic tools. What now? Are there any growth potential to that? What if we change from 10 to 12? There are some software limitations that even in the smaller portion of those, once you start with certain users, once you get to like 15 or more, you can't do it. It's just that there are limitations into this. You have to upgrade the database and all sorts of things. So you got to be mindful of those. Security is obviously goes without saying, but that's one of the key elements that you need to look into. And also resources for startups. One of the very last options, and the reason I put it in there is to talk about a point that we get a lot. Smart startup businesses, smaller businesses, we are very cost savvy. All of us, we want to make sure that we find the cheapest solution for the job. But what happens though is, as a general rule of thumb in sales and marketing, regardless of the industry that you're in, if something is free to you, you are the product. So you should be mindful of that. How they're using your data, how they're essentially using your business, that's a different conversation, but you got to be mindful about that. And you need to know that this, in terms of productivity and efficiency, this essentially has one of the key items to that. Even though they're offering you for free, you need to actually have the conversation and how that is going to help your productivity. So this is like kind of a high level understanding of how softwares and some of the key elements that could directly or sometimes indirectly impact the productivity. So if we go one layer down, then let's talk about the available solutions. Again, by the very nature of these two environments, the Google Workspace, because we're going to compare the two most, there are like some other third parties, other players out there that they offer the bundles, which fits the conversation today. But we picked two of the most important ones and well-known ones, Google and Microsoft. But the part of the reason that we cannot compare them side by side is by the very nature of how these environments have been built up. So what I thought might be beneficial for you is to pick a few items that are important in each one of these categories. And hopefully that will give you some ideas of what this workspace looks like and what type of solution are we talking about today. So in terms of Google Workspace, collaboration has always been something that people talk about when it comes to the Google Workspace. Why? Because Google has that real-time editing and commenting feature way before that, long before that Microsoft started that feature and kind of implementing that, co-authoring feature there. So that has always been one of the key pieces on the Google side. In terms of cloud-based, if you are in a business that you really don't need that much of, the local presence, on-premises presence, servers, or anything else, Google has always been a good player there in terms of, cloud-based environment. You can always get most of the things, access the files, documents, very nice interfaces, which we're going to talk about in a bit. So with an internet connection, you are good to go. Simplicity is another kind of options that we hear a lot from our customers, that they think Google Workspace is very simple and intuitive to use. Again, there are some conflicting comments out there once you start evaluating other tools like Google Hangout or these other tools. These are like very simple, easy to use, but in terms of features and everything, that would be a subjective kind of conversation. And sometimes people don't like some of the features or Google Calendar or some other stuff. But apart from that, it is a simple and intuitive interface to kind of look into on the Google side. On the integration aspect of it, Google Workspace also integrates seamlessly with other tools product, as I mentioned, Google Drive, Google Calendar. You don't look at it from like different tools and like what Microsoft and some others have. It's actually one unified interface and experience. So you can actually access multiple things. And also the price. Google tend to offer more free stuff. Again, as I said, you need to make sure that what we talk about affordable means what exactly we get from Google. We hear that again all the time, that once you start using that, when you want to scale it to a certain degree and then add certain users to that, then at that point, some of those challenges starts on the Google side. But that's, again, pricing is something that we could definitely look into and could be considered as an advantage on the Google side. Moving on to the Microsoft 365. Again, I picked like 4 or 5 of those. And for instance, familiarity is one of the most important things. We all knew how to work with Word and Excel and PowerPoint, right? This has been there forever, seems like it. And Microsoft is leveraging that right now on the 2 different versions, on-premise, obviously, on your machine as an app, and also online. Offline capabilities is another option that Google sometimes don't have. I heard there are like some third parties that might do it, but we never actually seen anything on the Google side. But on the Microsoft side, as we all know, the offline portion of it is huge. We have been using this for years and people are comfortable using that. So if you think that you need the app and you need users that are not always comfortable with working on the cloud, or you don't have a network, like reliable network to work on, that might also be a good option. Security, it seemed like Microsoft is putting so much work, especially for the last couple of years in terms of compliance and security. Microsoft has done a lot in terms of adding more features to that. So we would assume, and I think we are convinced with the confidence level of at least 80–90% that Microsoft is doing a better job today in terms of managing the security and also, giving you some pointing system around what you have on the cloud to make sure that you're secure enough and then make the things to essentially improve your security posture. In terms of customization, Microsoft offers so many customization, and I will talk about it in a bit. What do we mean by that? And integration is also another one. When we talk about integration, we also have that, as you remember, on the Google side, but the integration here has like kind of a different meanings into this too. Microsoft has, if you click on that, what we call the waffle on Microsoft 365, you see like at least 20 or so applications. That seamless integration is something that is today is a huge plus. And also Microsoft Teams that could connect to multiple different, like close to like 400 connectors these days. Overall, the point that I'm trying to bring home is both of them offer strong productivity features. We are not convinced that to say maybe in a few years we could, but again, depending on what we see today, we cannot prioritize and say this one is the best option over the other one. What happens though is Google Workspace seems like, and I tend to pick like the kind of right verbiage, it might be some other combination of words that we could use, but those were like kind of my assumptions based on what we've seen. The collaboration and simplicity might be Google, at least you can do, and we can work on that. And I'm not saying that Microsoft is not offering those, but if you're familiar with Microsoft and you're comfortable with that space and you want to go after some customization to some extent, that would be a Microsoft 365 solution. Again, both of these can cover all of these, and experts like our company and others, and there's so many of them out there, can essentially help you distinguish between these 2 products and what makes more sense for your business. And with that, as you remember, we talked about, us being a Microsoft 365 shop. So I'm going to walk you through some of the savings topics. We're not going to deep dive, obviously, for the sake of time, but happy to connect after this or offline. You can just ping me and I'll be more than happy to schedule, a call or phone call and then walk you through some of these items. And again, I'm not going to scare you with all the logos, just that you know that each one of these logos represent a tool that Microsoft essentially has behind the scenes. License is one of the key differentiator in any type of Microsoft environment. Meaning, if you look at that, depending on what we've learned in terms of oversizing it, over purchasing it, and a few other categories that we see, if you followed certain patterns like successful and best practices out there, we've seen close to like 20 or 25% savings in your packages that you go for. Again, you're talking about Microsoft. The other piece is the storage savings. You might think that it's cloud, it's storage, we can always use that. But what we see is that on the collaboration aspect of it, there are so many spaces that people use under what we call tenant, which is essentially where they put all their data, that they can essentially clean up. They can remove that, they can archive it local so that they don't need to go through that. Even though Microsoft tells you that it's pennies to add more to this, but still, you don't need to do that because that will also be an administrative overhead for you too. For instance, Microsoft OneDrive is offering 1 terabyte of data. It's free, it's included. And sometimes we see that it's one of the most secure environment that Microsoft can implement. Yet we see so many users are not using those. In terms of collaboration piece, Microsoft has these 4 logos in that space. Microsoft SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, and Viva, which is now a player with like 3 or 4 different sub applications in there. There are so many ways that we could also help in terms of, how we could manage the communication, how we can manage the, let's say, external collaborators to your environment, how we could manage the data, and they will all impact your operational costs and your essentially initial investments. And those are definitely solutions that they could do, and we do it all the time these days. I'm going to pause and talk about this a little bit because it seems like that's something that's more relevant to your audience that joined this conference, this seminar. What we do know in Microsoft is that Microsoft for years, just to give you a quick background there, for years, there was always a challenge out there that should IT people manage their business applications and be in charge of those, or business people. Fast forward, this has always been a concern and conversation for service providers like Microsoft. Microsoft finally decided that what if we create our own programming language so that users that are not necessarily super technical could leverage that. A tip here in a Microsoft vocabulary. Every time you see a power next to some name, that means Microsoft is targeting a certain group of users in an environment. And who are those guys? What is the persona there? End users are end users. They just use the data or information. They just don't want to touch anything else. As long as they do their daily job, they're good to go. Admins are the gods, essentially. They can do anything they want. They're technical. They can understand it, delete, add workspaces, environment, etc. There is a third group that we call them citizen developers, champions. They're like they have different names in different contexts. But these power users are the ones that Microsoft is specifically targeting to that. So if I know about my business enough that I could put together the workflow and the processes, this whole bundle of application is something that you need to look into. And another beauty of it is that these are all low code and no code. You're done, because once we talk about automation, application development, business analytics, we quickly think about, oh, someone is typing and punching codes and all of that. That's how Microsoft has changed. They actually published a legit document a few months ago, and we use that. I'm presenting it in a CFO seminar soon, I think this month. And with that, they sampled, I think, close to a good number of companies, global companies, enterprises, as well as SMBs, to see how much they're saving with this based essentially in bringing the knowledge in-house and improving the knowledge of, the citizen developers or normal users to become the developer kind of people. And the numbers are like huge. The savings are like close to like 20 or 30%. And another thing to remember is every time you run into some issues, the difference this time is there are thousands of experts out there to help a person. So it's not like it's one tool and one group only understand the knowledge of it, so they have to use that. So, and another good thing about it is most of it is already included in your environment. If you want to do it on the development aspect, just to learn about those, it's completely free. And then there are like other versions that you can actually add your workflows. And I cannot tell you how many projects we have been involved that users are replacing their legacy applications, let's say user onboarding with this, HR tools and systems with this, because two or three of those can work collaborative, these tools, with the other collaboration tools in Microsoft, since they're all connected behind the scenes. And then they give you like the seamless kind of experience of, let's say, HR system or offboarding or, PTO requests or those kind of things. So this is something that you could definitely look into. Microsoft actually built the AI builder into this, and now they're bringing more intelligence into that, meaning even if you don't know all the aspect of it, the next version of this would be you just tell the Microsoft Cloud what you want, and they will come up with the tool, and they will essentially write everything for you, and you can just look into this. Or also a Copilot, which is another feature which I'm going to explain. Another feature that we could talk about is also the integration with the Copilot and ChatGPT. I'm sure you guys have heard it a lot, but that's also another key changes that Microsoft has done, especially interaction and integration of ChatGPT with Bing, which is already out there. Try it out and you will see what it is. And Copilot is also a feature that is going to release soon, meaning I'm giving you like business example of it. You can just go into like one aspect of some businesses, and let's say you want to build out a presentation. And that presentation is essentially something that you just want to build based on a certain context. You will tell the intelligence behind the system that I need a presentation based on this context. You will have it in 10 seconds. And then the reason they call it Copilot and they're not calling Pilot is that you still have control over everything. You can just make some magic, but all the hard work has already been done for you. And that's also in the work, and Microsoft's going to announce it. Quickly on the hardware savings, Microsoft has like multiple new features on this piece that could save you a ton of money. Windows 365 is one of them, for instance, and also Microsoft Azure Virtual Desktop. You can essentially save on your hardware with any of these two, like Windows 365 and this other one, which is depending on different tools. Again, you need an expert to kind of tell you what would essentially makes more sense in your specific environment, depending on your in-house tools, native tools, or the ones that you're using, let's say off-the-shelf kind of tools. Again, key takeaway here. We know that Microsoft could be an essential tool for many organizations. We could definitely know that these guys can essentially be a great player here. However, what we learn is that choosing the right plan, utilizing the discounts and promotions, regularly reviewing the licensing agreements, and also optimizing the collaboration tools, those are all could be a huge benefit to your saving strategy. But the main point here, even though we get these one-off questions or one-piece question about one aspect of it, we know that the holistic approach is the name of the game, meaning we look at the business in a holistic way, like how many tools you got, what services you're using, what type of savings we can have, and that will essentially give you that long-term insurance that that even if you're saving money today, that is going to be consistent across the board. And that's something that experts like us, companies like us, can help you distinguish. With that, I'm going to move over the other one. Hopefully I didn't spend too much on. Okay. And then the one last piece, now that we kind of understood what Microsoft has to offer and what kind of savings we have, I'm going to end with this piece, meaning let's say I'm a startup company, I'm an early stage startup company for some of you on the call, that how am I going to benefit from the technology budget savings? So what we learned, again, as part of the experiment that we did in AWOX with our team, is that we went back and we interviewed and worked with a number of different startups last year. We distinguished 8 or 9 different key items that we need to look into as an early stage startups. What are you going to pick as a tool for your communication? What are you doing on project management, file storage, brainstorming tools, project website, wiki, resource tracking, and search was also actually added after this. Solution today is you go out there and you shop around. I just included a few of those tools, but for project management, you might think that let's just pick Asana from this. Or for the data storage, let's just use Google for that. What if we need Ignite for our data? And as you could imagine, we're talking about multiple tools and multiple brands that they need to work together. You need to learn the knowledge of the challenges that might happen interacting those tools. So there is a learning curve, there is try and error. And sometimes when you get to a certain point, you might realize that, oh, wait, Google Zoom cannot do this. Maybe we need to do that with Smartsheet. Those conversations are always out there. And maybe one possible cost-saving solution could be to bundle everything together. And that's essentially one of the things that EVOX did. So we, based on Microsoft tools, we identified that all the one-to-one mapping is already there. So if you want to have a communication piece, you want to have the project management, wiki, project website, even the cybersecurity aspect of it, and you want to get rid of the whole learning curve and everything that comes with it, the try and error, or maybe want to have a data storage for that, this whole bundle is going to be a one-time, for instance, tools that you can have. So this is like one solution that you can just look into. I'm just giving you some ideas on what type of solutions might be out there. This is what we came up with. There might be other great creative ideas out there, but this is just to give you, at least a sense of what type of solutions are we talking about and how we can help. We could also plan everything based on different budgets, especially in the early stage startups. We all understand it. We are still kind of a startup company in a technology world, so we understand the challenges. We know that if you go out there and then buy for every single one of these tools one by one, you will still end up paying 20 or 30% more than a bundle. And a few other things that we offer, like affordable budget plan. You can actually have an a la carte models, but what we do is maybe you don't need all the tools baked into one. That's essentially what we can help. And we're also providing 24/7 support, weekends also included. We're doing free training, onboarding for the members. And as you can see, if you have other needs, compliance, FDA related things, legal, HR, finance, the beauty of this platform is that, and it's not our platform, it's Microsoft platform, we're just customizing it for you, that you could actually connect all of those into this one. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. I think we are kind of close on the time. I tried to be respectful of that. And Tyler, back to you.
All right.
That
was great, Poya. That was awesome. Now what I'll do is I will open up to Q&A. So first off, does anybody have any questions? I ask it that you use your raise hand button on the bottom bar on your Zoom toolbar, the reaction button. No. Well, all right, I'll start. I have a question actually. So, does using, is there like an issue when you have Mac OS, when you're using Microsoft 365 suite? Because I know, maybe they don't support something, or, maybe there's an issue with it running correctly.
Great question. Thanks, Tyler. Yeah. So I would say with the confidence level of at least 90%, you get most of the features that you want, because that's the approach these days. Microsoft wants to make sure that they can play with everyone. That was not the case if we were talking about, a few years ago. Now we see some challenges, obviously, in terms of OneDrive or might be some other tools that you still run to some issues here and there. But overall, in terms of using that, you could essentially use everything, all the features on on Microsoft 365. And also one thing, for instance, for some of the Power Platform, if you remember, we discussed, for instance, on the Windows, you have a desktop version of it. In Apple, you can't have that. Essentially, that's not a desktop version, at least not that I know of, and there might be something in future. So that's one solution. The other thing is, if you remember, we talked about Windows 365. That is also a Microsoft version of Windows. So if you want to leverage all the tools and everything that you have, and you feel like there are some inconsistencies or problems, that could be a small interface into Microsoft Word. You can just have that per user per month. And then with the browser, with any browser you have, you just connect to the Microsoft environment and you can do anything, pretty much anything you want, because that's a Microsoft interface.
All right, thanks.
Did that answer the question?
Yes. It seems like Zach has a question if in the chat, if you want to answer that.
In the chat box. Oh, okay. Let's see. Can you share some information on the cost difference between Google and Microsoft, which is less expensive? Sure. I mean, I can talk a little bit about the pricing of it. As you remember in the slides, I mentioned the free services on the Google side. The general kind of assumption is that Google is less probably pricier with all the customizations and everything that is excluded from that comparing to Microsoft. But at the end of the day, if you're talking about a group of, the team, again, it all depends on the business case, on the number of users, what is the future kind of growth potential. And once we have those information, we could definitely say that. It's not, I wish we could have like one slide to just compare everything side by side, but unfortunately that is not the case. And what we can do though is once we get a better sense of understanding of what you have and what you want to do, I'm sure we could find it. But again, we're not talking about like huge difference between those two items. We could get creative on both sides, but I would assume when you start, Google might be on a kind of a less pricier side.
All right, I have another question.
Sure.
So Microsoft has been investing heavily in OpenAI's GPT, right? So does Copilot use OpenAI's GPT, or does it use another model?
Well, as you know, the short answer is we think it does. It uses the ChatGPT for, especially the latest version of ChatGPT, that we think that's the Copilot that they're implementing, but they haven't actually released all of the obviously information even to our partners yet. But in terms of, bringing out, yes, correct. That's the most advanced version. Even if you look at Bing these days, there has been a change and some users noticed that they are now integrating the latest version of ChatGPT. So even if you go back to the OpenAI and test something versus testing something through Bing, you will probably get the smarter answer through Bing these days. So that's how Microsoft is integrating things behind the scenes. And OpenAI is definitely following that format too, correct?
All right, that sounds good. All right, does anybody have any more questions? Going once, going twice. I think we're coming up on time here. All right, well, I'll close it for now then. All right.
Wonderful.
Well, thanks everybody for coming to our webinar, our fourth joint webinar here, and thanks Poya, you did a great job.
Thank you.
So I will actually hand it off to Zach if you want to say some closing comments.
Thanks, Tyler. Happy to do so. Poya, thank you again for sharing this information with us. I think, Tyler, we will be posting this on YouTube. So if anybody needs to reference it again and get Poya's contact information, you'll be able to find it there. Thank you, everybody.
And if I
All right, thanks everybody.
And if I may add one last piece, sorry, before we kind of jump on. as we discussed with Work Lab and Venture Forum, if they bring us your name, obviously, all the startups and founders affiliated with your organization, if they bring the Work Lab terms, they will get an additional 10% in every services that we offer.
That's right. And Poya and I have organized this discount for anybody who is affiliated with Work Lab, and that includes people who are being educated by this webinar. So
absolutely.
all right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you both.